Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today we have a programme about clear seeing. I have three guests in the studio. We have David Bingham, who's been on many times before. We have Dan and we have Una. So we've basically had you on many times now on Conscious TV. We've always had a great response, David, to the interviews with you, and I know that both Dan and Una found you through Conscious TV and they had sessions with you. I think Dan was a personal one and Una was a phone session, and something happened in those sessions. So we're going to explore over the next hour or so exactly what happened, how it changed their lives, but we'll also look at your own lives, Dan and Una, before that, because I think you were both seekers. In fact, we'll start with you, Dan. You were seeking for quite a long time, weren't you?
Yeah, I guess I started properly seeking when I was about 25, and that was Buddhist meditation, actually, and I did that for a good 20 years.
And did you feel there was movement during that time? Did you feel that you were...
it was a fascinating time, if I'm honest, and I'm very grateful for the teaching that I had from those people, but it came to a natural end, and I guess about 2 years ago I became really interested in non-dualism.
And what attracted you to non-duality?
Well, it was very different. It is very different, I think, to perhaps more conventional paths, specifically the one I was supposedly on, in the sense that it wasn't talking about a linear journey that one might go on. It was more open-ended than that. I like the idea of circularity and of there being no linear sort of journey that one had to go on, as it were. That was quite a liberating idea.
And how did that idea affect you in your day-to-day life?
Well, I sensed that there wasn't so much of a person on a journey anymore, that there was really just this unfolding, on a moment-to-moment basis, and that there wasn't some imagined Dan in the past who had been on part of a journey, and then Dan in the future who was going to complete some sort of journey, and that really what was available was right here, right now.
I think you sent me some notes beforehand, and you were saying you had a very significant experience at some point, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, that was listening to an interview with John Wheeler, actually, and it's just fantastically simple, his message, which is you are what you seek. You are what you seek right now. And while listening to that, things just seemed to fall away. Certain boundaries, ideas of the body and of the mind seemed to fall away. And after that, things weren't really the same at all.
And how were they different?
They were just much simpler, and there was much more happiness around, and a sense of, how could I have missed this? How could I have missed this? This is so simple, so obvious. This is what's always been the case. And a great sense of freedom as well, and peace.
And then you saw or heard about David, and you...
Yeah, I actually watched one of your programs, actually, and what he was saying seemed to confirm something for me, sort of speaking the same language, as it were. And so a friend of mine gave me David's number, and yeah, the rest is history, really.
Well, yes, but it's the history that I'm also partly interested in. So you went to see David, and you sat with him, spent some time with you. What is your recollection of that session? What actually happened at that session?
Well, there were several phone calls before that, and interestingly, the first time I rang him, when I sat down, before I picked up the phone, I thought to myself, why am I ringing this person? I already know. I don't have any questions, actually. And the first thing I said to him was, hello, David, my name's Dan, I don't really know why I'm calling you. And he said, well, that's because you're already clear. You don't have any questions. And so there was a confirmation of something that had already, if you like, unfolded. But there were still many other conversations, and then actually meeting him face to face. was very helpful as well.
So how is it helpful? I know I'm digging around here, but people watching this is important for them to somehow have a grasp or an in and what can maybe happen for them, you see.
Well, I'd use the word resonance, I think, and I was talking to someone actually earlier about this. I think that everyone has a completely different journey that they go on, and some people seem to resonate with you and not resonate, and I just resonated. There was a resonance and a simplicity about that as well, utter simplicity about that. But funnily enough, that's not to say that previously there hadn't been people who I'd also enjoyed talking to, and that was the case as well, but that changed. So what I imagined would continue for perhaps years and years, decades, on this great search suddenly seemed to change. And that's okay. It just changed.
And did you feel that the work you'd done over the Buddhist meditations and other things, had they contributed to what happened?
Not really.
That's interesting, isn't it? A lot of people say that.
Not really in one sense, but in another sense, yes, perhaps. It's a hard question, though. At that time, that was perfect for me.
Yes.
And looking back at it, yes, I suppose back into the old story, there was a person there searching for what he thought was freedom. Looking back at that person, who doesn't seem to be there anymore, if I'm honest, that's what that person had to do.
So what do you mean by that? That person doesn't seem to be there anymore?
It's like a phantom. It's like a ghost.
So there was a Dan who had a personality and a lifestyle and thoughts and patterns, and you're saying that Dan is no longer there. Is that what you're saying?
The Dan which was suffering in a certain way isn't there. The Dan that was worried and neurotic, perhaps, about certain things, work or family. I've got 2 kids, so how are they going to be? That sort of thing. How are they going to be in the future? That sort of person, that's not really there anymore. Things concern you, but there's no sort of there's no drive to fix it, or there's no sense of it being wrong.
So you're not kind of hooked into these dramas?
No, so if my son falls over and bangs his knee, he falls over and bangs his knee. It's happened before, and it will happen again, so it's okay. I mean, and God forbid anything would happen to either of them. If it did, that would be the case as well. That would be the case as well. So it's only ever what it is. It's only ever what it is.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back, obviously, and we'll talk more about what happened in the session, maybe from David's point of view and his wider picture. But let's look at your little bit of history, if that's okay. So you were also seeking in your own way, weren't you?
I was, and it kind of started almost by accident because I hadn't really heard about spirituality or non-duality as such, and it was a friend of mine just one weekend. I called her on her mobile phone and I said, what are you up to? Would you like to meet up? And she happened to be in Inisheer, which is a small island off the west coast of Ireland, and she was at a retreat with Muji. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Muji, and I didn't have a clue what it was, or I didn't know anything about it, but the weather was beautiful, and I just hopped in the car and I went, and I arrived straight into this retreat, which had already started. And I have to say, like Dan, the word, I think that for me there was a resonance there. I didn't know what it was, but when I walked in the door, there was like an instant resonance there. It's hard to describe. It's just kind of like, a resonance. I don't know how to describe it exactly. I guess it might be a falling away, if it might be falling away of the identity or thoughts of something when you actually meet someone who's self-realized, but I'm not sure.
So you kind of felt less attached to Una as you knew her, kind of
That's
thing.
right. It's a kind of like a moment of just being very present in the moment, and it just kind of happened like that.
And how was your life at the time?
Well, to tell you the honest truth, it wasn't probably the best time in my life, which is maybe why I fell into this. But it wasn't a conscious. It wasn't a conscious decision. I had actually read "The Power of Now," "The Power of Now" by Eckhart Tolle.
Okay.
Maybe a month before that, or short while before that, and that was the first ever book that I'd read about, spirituality as such, and. Yeah, and then there was that moment, but after that, the mind came in, and I suppose I became a seeker as such, because then I wanted to kind of understand more and know more about it.
And I think, again, from what you told me earlier, you went to see someone called Stuart Schwartz.
That's right. Yeah, and it was a very similar situation with Stuart Schwartz. There was a retreat on in Galway. And I decided, okay, well, at that time I was going to any retreats and satsangs that were on in Ireland, and I didn't really know much about Stuart Schwartz. And again, it was very similar. I just walked into the room where the retreat was on, and I felt there was an instant resonance or something there. In a sense, it's like for me, like on an experiential level, it's like a deep relaxation. It's like a kind of a relief, and I think it might be a letting go of the very fixated thoughts, and and it's a kind of a letting go and a relaxing or something. So I had that same kind of resonance with Stuart Schwartz when I first met him. Yeah.
Hmm. And then you found David again through Conscious TV, and you phoned him up, didn't you?
I did, actually. I saw the interview. There was a panel interview where David was talking with two other. There was Tim Freak and Richard Sylvester, and I watched that. And again, there was a bit of a resonance with David, especially some of the things that he talked about. He talked about, well, he placed an emphasis on consciousness being infinite and infinite possibilities. There was something about that kind of spoke to me. So I decided, I'd call David after that interview. I decided to call him. Yeah.
And what happened during that conversation that you remember?
Well, I called him up, and the funny thing about non-duality, and I suppose it's because of the oneness, you're calling up just a total stranger that you've never spoken to before, and it's kind of a strange thing. I just called him up, and he had said on his website something like, consultations available or something. So I wasn't quite sure, and I phoned him up, and the first thing I said to him was, I'm not quite sure how the consultations work, I said. And then, I don't know, we just started talking. I wasn't really sure. I don't know, I think maybe Dan mentioned it as well. There's not that much thought involved. It was like a spontaneous thing.
Yeah.
And like even when I dialed the number, there was even a thought, oh God, why am I doing this? Whatever. But then, and then we got talking. We were on the phone, I think, for quite a long time. And during that phone call, there was a kind of a seeing, yeah.
Okay, now explain what you mean by seeing.
Well, when I was seeking all those years, seeking, I think I realise now in retrospect that I had this idea that I was seeking for this blissful state. And I felt bliss when I first met Muji, and when I met Stuart Schwartz, I felt this kind of bliss. And when I was talking to David, he helped me to see, I think, that bliss was an experience. And he asked me what was knowing that experience, what was knowing that bliss. And then I began to see that all those experiences, which I thought were spiritual experiences, were just that, experiences that come and go, and that they they change, they come and go, and they're impermanent, and that the knowing of that is the permanent, the permanent awareness. And David helped me to see that.
Okay, that's a big step, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a big realization.
Well, a big realization, yes, but at the time, it seemed like I remember thinking, oh, it seemed so kind of inconsequential at the time. It was like, oh, because I think it's almost, yeah, you've known it all along, but you just think you didn't know it or something. But it was very, and I remember saying to David, it can't be that, is it that simple? Can it be that simple or something,
Yeah.
Because I think you build it up into this big thing, as a seeker, I in my case anyway, I was looking for bliss and, permanent peace and happiness.
So you had an idea in your mind of what this might be like.
I had a vague idea, yeah.
And so you had this expectation.
Yeah.
And what happened didn't necessarily meet your expectation, but you saw something clearly, you saw reality clearly.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. The awareness, that never changing awareness is is who we are, and that everything else is just coming and going, and that.
Okay, thank you. So, David.
I thought that was great non-dual pointing there. I think it's fantastic. That was just such a great description, and so attuned to the way it is, because it is so easily overlooked, because it is our essential nature and it is already present. So people are looking for something new, and then when it is seen, you can hardly believe that it's so simple.
We are somehow programmed to expect something dramatic, and there are books about Kundalini awakenings, and then you read these stories about people who have these dramatic experiences and then their life changes, and that's I think part of the problem in a way, isn't it?
Yes.
That we have an idea of what we think the reality is. And as you both said in a very clear way, it was actually very ordinary, and yet very clear in itself. You both had actually similar experience in a way, didn't you? I know experience isn't the best word, but a similar realisation.
Yes, and like David said, I think the whole idea of it being not what you expect. I've heard lots of people say that. In fact, some people have even said, they're slightly disappointed, which is not really the case, I don't think. But it's not what you expect. It's been here all the time. How could I have missed that? What a buffoon. How could I have missed that? That's who I am. That's who I am. It's who I've always been. It's always been here.
So it's interesting that this John Wheeler tape, because wasn't it John Wheeler that also was the catalyst for you?
It was.
Yeah.
Was it that tape? Was it the
Get Real thing? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a fantastic tape.
Because when we first had you on Conscious TV, that was that same. Was it exactly the same program? Was it?
We've a mutual friend, Paul, and is it that Paul forwarded the recording to you, or how did you come about it? Doesn't really matter, but
No, but
it was a friend of it was a friend.
The same, yeah.
But I'd never heard anything like that myself, and just extraordinary simplicity that he got across.
So there's people watching this program, and they feel that they want what you guys have, because you found a degree of peace, you found who you really are. I know it's a silly question in one way, what advice can you give? And you have given a little story about how you arrived at this point. But maybe, David, what can you say to widen the picture for people?
In my experience, what's noticeable is that there are many people now who are ready to hear this, increasing numbers. And so there is a real resonance. And I think what's happening is the idea of it being really difficult, or something that is attained after a long period of spiritual practice, is falling away. I think people are recognising that much of the spiritual knowledge, much of the traditional spirituality in religion, and much of the New Age stuff as well, is actually taking consciousness into a cul-de-sac. But what I feel is that that's becoming exposed. I think people are recognising that much of that stuff is redundant, and it is on a level of knowing, because the infinite being is revealing itself to itself. And the evidence that I see is that that is something that, is becoming widely available. And it isn't something that anyone is doing individually. It's just that that seems to be what's arising. So I was talking to a guy recently by email, and he saw clearly, as a result of exchanging about 3 emails, which is absolutely amazing. So it seems to be more simple in the delivery, more simple in the communication. I think Una and Dan have just really very simply described the nature of self-realisation in such an utterly simple way, and it's just wonderful to hear them describing it in such a great way. I wish I could have said it that simply when I first came on, because it's just it is just so accessible, and it's just an amazing wave really now that is available to people, and it's just recognising that all the obstacles that appear to be there actually aren't there.
So, I know with Dan you were saying that you gave us a little account of, not account necessarily, but you explained about your relationship with your children, and there was practically, in one way, nothing changed, but your attitude changed. And I wondered whether, Una, you had a similar experience of how your attitude to day-to-day very ordinary situations changed after you saw reality clearly.
Well, it's kind of like my on the surface, I mean, nothing's changed really. My life's just carried on exactly as it was before. But I mean, again, it's strange to be using the word relaxation, but there's a kind of a deeper knowing, so that everything that happens on the surface, and my relationships with people and with my family, everything just seems so much easier. It's just easy. It's just easier because I suppose I don't tend to get caught up so much in giving something, something which is just passing like really big importance. So there's more, there's a more recognition of things are coming and going, and they're not. Things aren't so important. So there's a kind of a lighter, easier feel to things in general. But I would like to say, though, that, when I did quite a lot of retreats with Stuart Schwartz, and I did individual sessions with him, and I did a lot of work with him on letting go of the conditioning, all that programmed conditioning, of which there was a lot. And I think, that was a great help as well, like letting go of all those beliefs that you really believe so strongly, and seeing through those and letting go of those. And I think that really helped as well.
So that's was a loosening of your belief system.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, not to try and change it, but I guess just an awareness of. Just talk very briefly, not so much the technique that was used, but how that affected you.
Well, I suppose, everybody has conditioned beliefs about the world, about themselves, about life, and so on. And, I suppose as an individual, you hold tightly to some of those beliefs, and some of them you might be aware of, which is great. Others you might not, and they're kind of, maybe running your life a bit, or you're believing them and acting them out, and so forth. So I think, it was very helpful to look at some of those. Just look at them, be aware of them, and realise that they're not, that they have no reality, they have no substance really. They're just ideas, and I think that was quite helpful for me anyway in my case.
I know you were talking in an earlier programme we made today with Renata about the programmes that we have, and they are so strong, and it's almost as if we create our reality through these programmes. Do you want to explain briefly how you see that?
Yes. Trying to explain the kind of sequence, what I would say is that we begin as the infinite being and remain as the infinite being always. We've never moved from the infinite being. But what we've done is assumed certain boundaries and certain limitations. And from that we've built limitations on limitations. So even though all there ever is one's pristine nature as infinite consciousness, we've assumed the appearance of these programs so that we can experience limitation. And we've built them one on the other. You could say that there are personal ones, you could say that there are family ones, you could say that there are societal ones, and they're a different mix for everyone. But one of the main impediments to self-realization is the story of self-realization, when spoken of in the major religions with the saints and the figures, is that self-realization is an end to suffering and it's an end to limitation. Now, it is an end to limitation in that the infinite being that you are, the awareness or the consciousness that you are, doesn't suffer. That is already at peace. The paradox is that there can still be individual suffering. And the individual suffering is a kind of dream suffering. But it is still running. Those programs can still run even when one's true nature has been seen. In fact, seeing one's true nature is really the most beneficial thing in being able to dismantle the programs, because you know what you truly are. You're no longer believing that you're entangled in all of these conditioned responses to things. So you can begin to dismantle it. You can begin to unravel.
So you're not energising these programs.
Exactly.
They're losing their power over you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the key thing that happens with self-realisation, because the link between the sense of identity with the individual is severed, so that you recognise that your true nature has actually never been connected with that. It's just that we've assumed that there is a connection and that that's who we are. But that's an illusory connection, really, as is, everything has phenomenal existence. Everything within the ever-changing realm has phenomenal existence. So phenomenal pain is experienced as pain. Phenomenal pleasure is experienced as pleasure. But one's true nature, it never enters into that realm, really.
So you're nodding there, Dan.
You and I were talking about being hooked in, weren't we, into certain situations, and that's completely gone now. There's no sense of having to be hooked into certain situations, whether it be at work or with a family member or a friend. They might still roll on, but there's not the same sort of effort put into them, if that's the right word. They're just, I think you used the analogy of it being like a game. I think you described it as being like a game that you're playing with people, which is fine. We're all sort of...
So is there an awareness of the programs running and you just let them run without energising them? Or is this all happening on its own without you necessarily being aware of it?
It's just all going on its own, really. Yeah. It's just unfolding as it unfolds. And it's fine. I think that was one of the most sort of liberating things for me, that everything is okay. Actually, it always has been okay. There's nothing wrong. There never has been anything wrong with you or anyone. Things might be painful sometimes, but it never lasts, and life is okay, actually.
You see, there's a part of me wants to challenge you there, so I'm going to do this and see where this leads. People might say, well, that's all very well for Dan, and he's got a job and he lives in Bath, which is a nice place, but what happens if he's in a hospital in Libya, or he's just been shot in Syria, whatever, then maybe that's not so easy to have that attitude.
No, that would be extremely painful and unpleasant, desperately so. But again, I would say that would be utterly what was taking place, and nothing else. There would be no judgment of it. There would be no perhaps need for it to be anything other than it was. So if someone makes me sort of angry at work, they make me angry at work, but it doesn't hang around. It's gone.
The anger comes and then it dissipates.
Yeah, and it can be quite fierce for a while.
Yeah. So have people said anything at work about how you're different?
Not at work, but my wife said I seem to be happier.
And that probably makes her happier if you're
I think so. I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. What about you, Una, when you see something like anger or some old pattern arising? How's that for you?
Well, if I see an old pattern arising, I do try and look at it. I try and look at it and, I suppose bring it into awareness and see what old belief maybe might be running or something like that. I try and, I still, work away at that. Yeah.
And what do you tend to find when you look?
Well, I have to say, it's getting easier and easier, and it's almost happening by itself. But, for example, I think maybe, a couple of weeks ago I spent some time with somebody who was quite tense and angry, and when I went home I was quite irritated. So I kind of looked at that and I realised, I can't remember what I realised, but I think it was something to do that person was only reflecting back to me something that was going on inside myself. It had absolutely nothing to do with them when I really looked at it. And that's, again, I don't want to be boring by you, but again, it's very relaxing because, that irritation comes up and you think, oh, I looked at it, and when I realised that it had nothing to do with them, it was something in me, maybe some old belief or something, and then it just dissipated, and then, there's that kind of feeling of ease and relaxation again.
And do you find that it's helpful to go to the core of that belief, or do you just find that happens if it's necessary?
Yeah, it depends. I think when it's necessary, maybe, Things don't really affect you so much, maybe, but occasionally there might be something that I feel, my instinct or my gut is telling me, oh, this is something not quite right here, and then I would look at it.
So, what would you say, Dan? What would you say to somebody who's watching this, and they say, "I want what Dan has"? What would you say to them?
So you've already got it. You are already what you seek. I haven't got anything. There's no one achieves anything. It's our natural state. We already are, infinite beings, as David says, with infinite potential. There's no achievement of any kind at all. And it does have a flavour and a funny kind of way of being like a child. I mean, I've got 2 young children, so quite close to that experience, but there is that flavour of it, in a sense of being completely open to what happens next. They haven't got any structure or any sort of agenda, really. No concept of time, not really of space, to be honest. And so it's a bit like that, so it's what's going on right now. That's all we ever have, isn't it, I suppose? All there ever is.
And how does that change you as a parent?
That's a good question. I think it makes you probably a nicer parent, maybe, because you're not hanging on to anything so much. But the other day, one of them did say, "You're such a grumpy, horrid old daddy."
Really?
Yeah, they
They
did.
weren't seeing clearly, were they?
And I sort of said, "Well, yes, I am, because you pushed your brother off his chair. That's why I'm grumpy with you. Do you expect me to be happy that you pushed your brother off his chair?" And then that's that whole thing of it being a game, So I tell you off, But 5 seconds later, I'm giving them a hug and it's gone.
Yeah. So I get the feeling that the process of being a parent is like, it's not something you're thinking about, it's something that you're, what is appropriate comes to you, and you act on that, whatever comes. Is that right?
It's an interesting area of parenting, actually. And I talked to David about this because I think we talked about the conditioning of your own parents that you inherit. And so you kind of act out, perhaps, how you think you should parent. It's not an exact science, is it? I think every parent is different. So one parent will accept that and another parent will accept that. And it's probably quite a lot to do with your own conditioning. But, I get it wrong. My wife says, "Why did you do that? You've just upset them." And I said, "Well, I thought I should have said that." He said, "Well, no, you got that wrong." I said, "Okay, I got it wrong." But it doesn't really matter. I got it wrong, yeah.
So, Davey, let's go back to basics again. With clear seeing, we've had a very simple explanation from Dan and Una. Just explain again, from your words, what clear seeing is.
Clear seeing is really when the programming that we've invested in being a human being is kind of seen through. So you recognise that you are the being. You are the being with a capital B, rather than the human being with the story. And it doesn't mean the human story disappears, it's just that you've made the distinction between the two. So the human continues much as before, although with clear seeing, a consciousness does come in, and as Una was describing, she's able to look more clearly now, to see what the programming is and how to dismantle that or how to see through it. And as Dan says, also to see it as a game, because he can assume the role of being a grumpy dad, or he can assume the role of being a very loving dad, but he knows what he truly is he's the beingness within which all the appearances are arising. So he can assume these roles, and we can assume any role. We can assume the role of a relationship, we can assume the role or the participator of an argument or a fight. Not that you'll particularly choose that, but there aren't really any limitations. But it depends on the appropriateness in the situation. So sometimes, it's necessary to behave in a particular way, but there's a realisation that it's a role that's being played. And clear seeing is where there's a clear knowing of one's true nature, which is just the simple awareness within which everything is arising.
Now, I get the feeling that most people, if not everybody, is in clear seeing sometimes. Am I right there?
I wouldn't use those terms.
Okay.
Because the nature of clear seeing is that one's true nature is seen. Now, one's true nature is ever present, so it's not that it's ever been anywhere or that it goes anywhere. But one of the things within the story of spiritual seeking is that there is a state that accompanies clear seeing. And most people think that if there is silence, that if there is, peace, that there is clarity, so that there's never a losing of the knowing of one's true nature from moment to moment. And that's permanently established and it never goes. To me, that isn't exactly the way it is. It's more that once one's true nature is known, there's nothing that is an impediment to clear seeing, because whatever arises, whether it's, telling off your son, or, having a conversation with somebody who's very angry, or it doesn't matter what it is, because it's simply clear seeing is simply knowing that it is the true nature that one already is, the awareness that is aware of whatever is arising. So you don't have to fix anything that's arising. You don't have to make a bit of turbulence go away for there to be clear seeing. It's just that you're seeing clear. You're clearly seeing what turbulence is. Turbulence has a flavour. There's an experiential component, sometimes an emotional component. That's what's arising. So that isn't seen as an obstacle to clear seeing, because you're recognising that whatever is arising is being clearly seen, because it's recognised that that is just phenomena that's appearing. So the relaxation that takes place that these guys talk of is relaxing into knowing that you're already where you are. Nothing can be an impediment to that, because it's only by virtue of one's true nature that anything can be experienced. So, suffering here or, discomfort there isn't something that you feel you have to overcome. And you know without question that it doesn't have to be overcome for clear seeing. And I guess the concept that I've come to see, which is as a result of just kind of integrating this into daily life, is that really everything is already as it should be. So if you do meet someone who's a bit grumpy, or somebody says to you, you need to do this, then it's like when you came down into the studio earlier today and you said, I don't like that. Now that wasn't a problem. That was actually perfect, because that's what was required. You felt it, you acted on it, I recognised it, and then we did something different, and as a result of that it was better. So nothing is ever seen to be a problem. You don't see anything. There's nothing to overcome. It's just it's really recognising that what's happening, everything we need to see and everything we need to see is arising in front of us. So you don't need to go anywhere else, because you're the infinite being. Everything comes to you. It's all here. The seeking is just a mode where we've pretended we're not here and we have to go over there to find something. But when the seeking comes to an end, there's really just a seeing that here you are. Everything that's required will be appearing before me. I don't need to orchestrate anything. I don't need to engage the mind to try to push this over there or pull this over here, because it just happens, because what is orchestrating all of it is infinite intelligence, infinite love, and therefore, why not allow that instead?
What my question was trying to do was to try and find encouragement for people to find like a portal, if you like. We're all, including myself in this a lot of the time, we're all so busy mentally getting on with our lives, and just the day in the studio here is very demanding. And it's like the clear seeing is there and it's forgotten, because there's this mental challenges going on and reactions and whatever. And for me anyway, I think there's often a portal there that takes me direct into clear seeing.
Yes.
And if there's an awareness of what clear seeing is, then it's more available, more transparent. And I'm talking from up here rather than down there. And I think a lot of people have this. It's just they don't recognise it in their daily life. It's just like you say, enlightenment or freedom or self-realisation. They think, oh, it's so far away. And yet, is it so far away? No,
it isn't.
And it's, what we try and do in Conscious TV is just take things that maybe seem very mystical and complicated and try and make them not just simple, but accessible. That's the word I'm looking for. So I'm looking for, maybe all of you we have about 5 minutes left. Maybe all of you can just briefly say something about the accessibility of clear seeing, if that means something to you.
Could I just have another go at that one?
Yeah.
Because really what you're describing is experiencing through a certain type of programming, because you know what it is to be peaceful. But what we do is, through conditioning and through certain beliefs, we've built a structure that is giving rise to our experience as it is. Now, I hope you don't mind me being personal here. I'm going to be. With Iain, because Iain has been successful in life, and Iain has a powerful intellect and also very strong intuition, there's a trusting of the way Iain operates, because Iain has achieved a lot. You know, there have been great things that have been achieved as a result of the functioning. Now, what I would say is that there are certain programs that have been installed to do with control and to do with the way Iain operates that has been very effective, but it hasn't been infinitely effective. So just by looking at one or two things, for instance, you tend to thrive on a lot of activity. You love a lot of things happening. You love it when, you know, you've got a lot to think about. You have these projects and it's really exciting. Now, the opposite side of that is that there is also the possibility to have it a bit more peaceful and to structure it so you could have a bit more peace. I mean, you have the opportunity for life to be however you want it to be. And really it's about acknowledging that the way it's structured is a conscious choice. It's a choice that you've actually made. It isn't that the circumstances are arising where there's difficulty and you have no control over it. It's because you've subscribed to a particular belief as to way life appears, and that these elements are installed, and then that's how it's experienced. But it's realising that you, as the infinite being, have created that whole story and that whole way of experiencing. And the only person who's responsible for that is you, the infinite being, currently appearing as Iain.
Yes, I understand. So how does Iain, somebody like me or anybody, how do they recognise these portals, or am I not on the right wavelength here?
Well, the clear seeing is always available. It's really a case of looking at the functioning in terms of the daily experience and trying to dismantle the programs that are giving rise to experience as it is. Because when certain things are removed from the programming,
That's what Una was talking about with
then
programs,
there's the opportunity for there to be more peace, or, you know, for there to be more silence, or for there to be more love or more expansion. It depends on the qualities that you like. And it isn't a question of anything being wrong. It's only a question of whether that's the way you wish to experience it. Because you, the infinite being, the experience can be any way that you want it. It's just that much of the conditioning that we have, the program conditioning, the belief systems that we've subscribed to, you know, much of the programming is to do with things like hard work. It's the idea that you have to work hard to achieve things, the idea that you achieve things in time, the idea that you personally have to take responsibility to make things happen in a particular way, when really you can take more of a back seat and allow the infinite intelligence to come through and allow Iain to take his foot off the gas.
Okay, thank you. Have you guys briefly got anything you want to say about?
Perhaps the idea of surrender for me was pivotal. Giving up these ideas of who I should be, could be, wanted to be, surrendering, giving up these fantasies about who I should or could be, and then seeing that actually I am perfect as I am. I'm perfect as I am. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with any of it, and that's always been the case since, you know, day one, whatever that is, since I wasn't born. I've always been perfect. There's nothing wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong with anyone else either. People can make bad decisions, but even those bad decisions are all right. And I did talk to David about that. The idea of evil is quite interesting. That, you know, people are bad, wrong, and I don't think clear seeing is about becoming good at all. It's not about becoming this great person, this blissful person, like you said, this blissful being who never is affected by anything. Quite the opposite. I think you enter into life totally, you surrender to life totally, to what is unfolding right in front of you right now. So Yeah, the idea of surrender, I think, is a really powerful one. Actually, the image of Christ on the cross is quite an interesting one. I did actually see a crucifix with Christ on the cross when all this was sort of unfolding, and it really struck me what that surrendering is all about. It's in every sort of major faith, I suppose, the idea of surrender and stopping, as lots of teachers talk about that, don't they? It's just stop.
Okay, thank you. We're going to leave the final words to...
No, well, I think what really helped me when I spoke to David on the phone was seeing that, you know, all through my life, like I remember childhood experiences or experiences as a teenager or as an adult and right now, and the knowing was always there. It was always there. It was never not there, and it will never not be there, if that's not too confusing. But I think when I was talking to David on the phone, he helped me to see that, you know, I don't know, we talked about some experience I had as a child watching snow falling, but there was a knower knowing that, there was a knower knowing everything. So it's that knowing, if you look at your life's experience as a person, that you can see that behind all of it there's a knowing that it is there. It's just, you know, it's there, and I think, you know, it's everyone can see it. I don't know.
Well, I think that's a great place to finish. So, Una, Dan and Davey, thanks very much and contributing to a very interesting programme. And to all of you out there, thank you for watching Conscious TV, and as always, I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name's David Bingham. I'm here in the studio with Eleonora Gilbert, and we're going to do a session on non-dual pointing, which I'm going to demonstrate to the viewers. So, hi Eleonora.
Hi.
We know each other already, so Eleonora is familiar with the process, but we're going to be doing it live, which is something that's never been done before. So, the way we begin is by just speaking to each other in the subject-object mode. So I'm addressing you, David is addressing you as Eleonora, and Eleonora is responding to David.
Okay.
So we begin in that mode, which is the normal human mode, the idea that we are the individual. And then from there, we move into the non-dual mode or the universal mode of consciousness. And the way we do that is by simply noticing that all there is a field of infinite consciousness. That field of infinite consciousness is just here. And appearing within the infinite field of consciousness are two human beings, one called Eleonora and one called David. So what we begin to notice is that there are sounds in the room, the sound of the camera, the sound of the fan, the sound of this voice. There's the light being registered also.
Yes.
So we notice that all of those things are arising equally within the infinite field of consciousness that we already are. So when Eleonora speaks, there's the sound of a voice arising in the infinite field of consciousness. When David speaks, there's the sound of a voice arising within infinite consciousness. So we've moved into that mode now, where what we're noticing is the unified field of consciousness that we are. That is the field of consciousness that everyone is, and that is our true identity. Mm-hmm. We've temporarily taken on the mode of human life. We've subscribed to the idea of being a human being, having a human mind, human thoughts and human emotions. But what we truly are is this infinite field of consciousness that is just here and now. So from that unified singular field of consciousness, we can notice that thoughts are arising, that perceptions are arising, that sounds are arising, but they're all arising singly within this field of consciousness. So no longer when there's the sound of Eleonora's voice is it heard as another person. It's simply heard as the voice that is arising within infinite consciousness, as this voice is arising within the singular field of consciousness.
Okay.
So I can sense that Eleonora is already fully aware of her true nature in that state, that the infinite field of consciousness is the level from which she is now experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
She is fully aware that, in fact, we're using words and we're saying that Eleonora is fully aware. What is really fully aware is the infinite being that Eleonora is, that David is, that this plant is, and that every single being watching this program is. And the next stage in the process of non-dual pointing, because we've noticed that it's a singular field of consciousness, what we notice and what everyone can notice is that within that singularity, all there really is love. Because it's a singular field of love within which everything is appearing. So Eleonora is the infinite being. David is the infinite being. The table is the infinite being. So with that clear, open field of awareness, the perception of these apparent separate objects actually amend in terms of the way they're perceived, because they're perceived as being you. You recognise it as a table, but you know that it's the infinite appearing within limitation as a table. And as a result of that, what arises is love, because the love arises as the recognition of unity. And in the process of non-dual pointing, what's noticed is that within this infinite field of love, there is actually the possibility for the connection between two hearts, because the love that is a singular field of love is that which pervades this love, which isn't personal love, it's universal love. Mm-hmm. And also the universal love which is arising in the heart of Eleonora. So from the recognition of the infinite field of consciousness, there's then the recognition of love. And then there's the recognition that these two emanations of the infinite are appearing within love, which creates a connection of love. But it actually isn't a connection because it's singular, that it is just the singularity of universal love. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to ask Eleonora to speak, because as Eleonora describes to me her experience of the unified state of consciousness, that gives the opportunity for the minds to connect within the singular cosmic mind, within the singular mind, which then enables the process of the flow, so that we're actually attuned to infinite consciousness, and that begins to permeate through the mind. So really just, if you can just subtly begin to describe the nature of this unified field within which you reside.
The nature of the unified field in which I reside.
What is arising?
Well, what I'm experiencing?
Yes.
I'm experiencing peacefulness. My heartbeat is quite low.
Mm-hmm.
Tingling in the top of my head, the back of my spine.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing that I'm experiencing is really this peace, this quiet, this stillness. In fact, you're not quite in focus.
Yes.
Almost.
Yes.
So that's what I'm experiencing.
That's
and
great.
an opening of my heart as well. When you talked about love being the unification, I'm not sure if I'm using the right words here, but you mentioned unity and love arising, and I completely recognise that and see that and feel that.
That's brilliant. So you can see that the love is universal love, that it isn't owned by Eleonora, it is your true nature though.
Yeah. And it's not personal.
Yes. That's very good. And can you just switch the perception now so that when you use the words to describe the sensations that are arising, so there's the sensation of peace and there's the sensation in the spine and at the top of the head, can you just notice that they are arising within this singular field of consciousness, that they're not personally owned by Eleonora?
Yes, but not until you said that. It's like I could still feel my body, my tingling, but yes. I mean, yes, the sensation are experienced here, but they don't necessarily belong to me.
That's great. Because that really is the simplicity of one's true nature. Because so much of spiritual teaching is to do with development through spiritual practice, but actually everything that's required to realise one's true nature is here in this moment, and it always has been. It's just that we've believed things to the contrary. We've believed that it's something that's at a distance, something that we need to attain, something that we need to aspire to, something that some people have and we don't. But actually it's already here. And if there are experiences to do with suffering, or if there are experiences to do with discord, that's really just mental programming. And those experiences are known just as easily as the experience of peace. So it isn't that one's true nature is lost if there is suffering, or if there is confusion, or if there is any other experience that isn't considered to be pleasant. It's just that that's what's arising at that time. And it's arising because we've subscribed to particular types of experiences. Maybe we wanted to know what suffering is. Maybe we want to know what suffering is so we can experience it in contrast to our true nature. So it's a very simple thing to do, and it doesn't require a spiritual teacher. Any two people, providing there's an allowing of the process, and providing people leave the beliefs that they have about the nature of what the self is, or any concepts that they have about spirituality, in the process of connecting within the infinite field of consciousness. That can actually be done very easily, because it is our true nature. It's fully present here and now, and it's accessible to everyone. And by just going through those simple steps. So I shall just repeat what the steps are. The first is to engage with the person in the normal sense, which is in the subject-object mode. So it's David talking to Eleonora. And then there's a simple noticing that in reality it is an infinite field of consciousness. It's a singular field of consciousness. And there's the sound of this voice, there's the sound of a voice over there, there are other perceptions, and they're all arising equally within this field of consciousness. There aren't any that are more or less who I am. It's simply phenomena arising within the singular field of consciousness. And so from that level, from the noticing of the singular field, can arise universal love, because universal love is also the manifestation of our true nature. It's a very subtle manifestation of our true nature. And especially if you're with someone where there is resonance and where you feel that you can relate to them closely, then it's very easy to be able to tune in to the direct experience of infinite universal love. So from there is a connection, only using words, because there's no connection in unity, obviously, but there is a shared awareness of infinite love. And then there can be a tuning in on a mental level, where you tune in and you notice the thoughts as they're arising, and you can just notice that the thoughts that are appearing, the concepts that are appearing, the speech that's appearing is arising within the being that you are. And then as you do that, you realize that we've always resided in this non-dual realm. We've never actually entered into the realm of separation. This is where we've always been, and this is where we are. And it doesn't matter what appears to be arising in the world, all the dramas that can appear in the world, but none of those dramas will affect your essential, infinite, universal nature, because it isn't touched by any of those. They're simply arising within the infinite being that you are. So, one of the ideas regarding self-realization is that if you move back into the subject-object mode, then we've in some way moved away from our essential nature again. But that isn't the case. It's just that because you are the infinite field of consciousness, you can move between any states of consciousness. You can move into the subject-object mode when you're talking to your greengrocer or your hairdresser, and you can move into the unified field in any other sense. You can move into the unified field in terms of communicating with people. When you speak to people, you can experience on that level. So it's really knowing that the experiencer doesn't have any attributes. Everything and everyone is this singular field of awareness that is simply aware. So it's consciousness that is aware. That's what we are. And when you know that, you can choose to experience life in unity, or if you wish to enter into the subject-object mode, you can do that also. So, do you have any questions, Eleonora? You just seem very clear to me, actually, but I would like to hear anything.
And what I noticed is that immediately what comes up, again, I remember hearing once from Adyashanti actually saying that we are only one thought away from knowing really who we are. And when you talked earlier about connecting and noticing, connecting with the mind and noticing the thoughts, one thought came up saying, yes, it's very easy to be in this particular oneness, let's say, because I don't have any agenda with you. I don't have a history with you. I don't have anything going on. But I can imagine with one of my sons, for instance, really being taken out of, if we can say even taken out of, but recognizing the investment in being acting or responding in the habitualness of mother mode, son mode.
Yes.
So, on the one hand, I recognize we're only one thought away from knowing really who we are. And I also recognize that, wow, what happens when I'm there? When I am caught by the thought, caught by the pain body, caught by the history. Caught by wishing something to be different than it is right now, right and then. So that would be my question is that, oh, yes, this is great. How can I...
Well, really, it comes down to acceptance, because you can, if you take the example of your relationship with your sons, it may be that your sons aren't ready to hear this yet. And if they're not, then it's really easy, because you can just allow it to be as it is. if intuitively you feel that you could convey something in the right moment where you may be able to relate to them and to be able to share the experience, then that would be great. But in either case, it's very simple, because either they will be receptive, which is wonderful, or if they're not receptive, then there isn't any need to try, because we simply accept that that's the way it is. And we don't make that wrong. We don't say that there's something wrong as a result of that, because their current experience is perfectly valid.
So there is no problem then.
None at all.
It's like, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you everybody. I hope that's been of some enjoyment to you. Thank you. Hello, my name's David Bingham, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to realise who you truly are. We've all believed ourselves to be human beings, and everything that we see and hear reinforces that. All the people we meet, everything you hear on TV, on the radio, in the books you read, it's all reinforcing the idea that you are this person. But I'm going to invite you to look at another possibility. I want you to see that the awareness that is aware isn't confined to the body. This awareness is just present. It always is. When you were 2 years old, you were aware in this moment, and it appears as though time has gone by, but you're just here. The awareness that you are is just present. So just begin by noticing that that awareness has no boundaries. It isn't located within the brain. It isn't located within the mind. It's a universal field of consciousness, a universal field of awareness. And it simply is. You can't move towards it and you can't move away from it. It's just here. And then just notice that everything arises effortlessly. There's awareness of the body. There's awareness of the room that you're sitting in. There's awareness of the sounds. There's awareness of traffic going by. There can be awareness of birds singing. There can be awareness of the furthest galaxy. There can be awareness of the wind. Everything is arising in awareness, and the awareness is who you are. You've never been imprisoned within the human body. You're just simply the awareness that is simply here. No effort, no trying, no going anywhere, no getting anywhere. Just here. You can play the games of acquiring. You can play the game of pretending that you need to do something. But really, you're just here. And you're just experiencing everything arising. So at any time it's possible to switch from the story of being the individuals, the story of being the human being, and realise that you're simply the being with a capital B. And that being, there's just one being. And that one being is who you are, and it's who I am, and it's who everyone is. There's no duality, there's no discord within that. And everything is arising within it. So just notice what's arising. At any moment, if you feel discord, if you feel as though life isn't going the way you want it to, if you get entangled in the story or believe you're entangled when actually you never were, just notice. Just notice the awareness that you are, that's always just here. It doesn't matter where you are, it's always with you. If you wake up at night, notice it's there. If you ride on the train, notice it's there. If you're eating, if you're walking, or if you're running, just notice that there is awareness, and then notice what's arising within it. And just notice that all of that awareness and everything that's arising is arising effortlessly. And that's all that's required to know one's true nature. And you can move in and out of that because you're the infinite being. That's what you are.